everybody. Hey, thanks for joining us tonight. Sorry about that. As you can see, Susie Finkbeiner is and there's Shawn. Hi, guys. Thank you for both of you joining us. I have one announcement for everybody that is with us today, either on Zoom or Facebook. We are in West Michigan, do have some storms in the area. We need the rain, so I'm not complaining. But it does mean there is a chance of lightning. And you know what? I just want to warn you that if we end up having a lightning strike and it takes our internet down or our electricity off, Shawn will still be on, Becky will join you, and then we will come back on as fast as we can. So just hang in there with us. If you're having trouble on Facebook, they're also, you can join us on Zoom. They will send out the link for that. So we'll get it all figured out, but hopefully we'll just have rain and no thunder and lightning while we're on the air. So, and thank you for your patience ahead of time. So, and thank you too for joining us. I guess I should look at the camera instead of myself. That is ridiculous. See, I'm really new at this. But thank you, Shawn and Susie, for joining us tonight. We're glad to have you.
Oh, this is awesome.
Thanks for having us.
So, and it's a little different for me to have two authors here with me, so bear with me, but whoever wants to go first, Shawn, would you like to tell us about The Weight of Memory?
Yeah, sure, Chris. It's great to see you guys. Susie, wonderful to see you as always. So The Weight of Memory starts with the protagonist, Paul Elias, who in the first chapter receives a terminal diagnosis. He is responsible for his granddaughter, and so he becomes concerned about who will raise her, and he decides to take her back to the place where he grew up, which is a small town called Nisa, which is kind of an isolated peninsula, a lakeside peninsula. And so he takes her back there to see if he can find someone who can raise her. But once he gets back there, his granddaughter, who is a little bit eccentric, starts to have these sort of dreams, night visions, imaginations, where she goes off in the night, she sneaks out of the house, and she's learning things about the island and about Paul, and about the death of his wife, which happened 40 years before, things that even Paul didn't understand or know. So it's kind of the journey of Paul going home and taking his granddaughter there, and then also a journey of discovery into the past.
And I told Shawn this earlier. I finished it earlier today, and it is very, very good. So make sure if you haven't ordered your copy, you get one soon. So.
And I will say, I have read all of Shawn's novels, and I have enjoyed every single one. But this is hands down my very favorite so far.
Oh, thanks, Susie.
There's a nice endorsement for you. Put that on the front.
That's right.
Susie's favorite. I'll just write it in Sharpie.
There we go.
I'll go on.
You can write it on all 12 of them that are in circulation.
No, because Shawn just today found out that he sold out of the first print run, which is fantastic. That is so exciting because people are buying the book, which is so great.
Yep, he sure did. We were very excited to hear that. So Susie, tell us a little bit about The Nature of Small Birds.
Well, The Nature of Small Birds is actually set in 3 different timelines. So 1975, 1988, and 2013. And it revolves around the story of an adoption. In 1975, at the very tail end of the United States involvement in the Vietnam War, 3,000 Vietnamese children were airlifted out of their home country to be adopted in Western cities and states and countries. I don't know why I just said all those, but they were. And they were adopted into Western families in Canada, Australia, and the United States. And this is the story of one American family who adopted a little girl from Vietnam, and about her search for identity and finding that family runs deeper sometimes than genetics.
Interesting. And it is very, very good. I enjoyed it. I love the cover. Shawn, I love the color of yours too. So.
Oh man, Revell just does such a fabulous job when it comes to covers. Every cover that they've done for me has been just perfect.
Yeah, and I know they have made some different decisions on artwork, and they're doing such a great job. I was talking to somebody else in publishing, and I think we should have awards for book covers again. I know they used to do them many years ago, or at least I think they did. I think they need to bring that back because there are some gorgeous covers out there.
I say that these win.
Yes.
Yeah.
We'll just practice.
That was, yeah. I mean, that's the great thing. Like with Susie's cover, it was totally like, it wasn't what I expected. But then when I saw it, I thought that's perfect. Like that is perfect. And there's so many covers out there that are just exactly the same as all the other covers in that genre. And so I think when you see something fresh like that, it's really fun.
I agree. I totally agree with that. So, Shawn, tell me, what are you hoping readers will take away from Weight of Memory? So,
Chris, when I wrote the book, the first thing that I knew that I wanted to try and do was to create the situation where, and it's kind of written in a hybrid first, second person, where the protagonist is actually speaking to his granddaughter, which I love. Marilyn Robinson did that in Gilead, and I just love that so much. And I thought, I really want to try that. So I knew I wanted it to be written to the granddaughter, but I also wanted to put Paul in this place right at the edge of death. So I knew that, he receives the diagnosis, chapter 1, and the doctor tells him anytime to 3 months. And that kind of becomes this refrain in his mind, anytime to 3 months. And I knew that I wanted to put him right there. And so I think what I would like to invite the reader to do, I know it's kind of a heavy topic, but is to join Paul in that situation, to think, okay, here's where Paul is, this is what he's going through. And to kind of walk with him as he considers his life. And I think, as I said before we started recording, unfortunately, I have some friends, one friend in particular recently who was just diagnosed with cancer. And I think it was in Anne Lamott's book, Bird by Bird, where she says that people in that situation teach us how to live, those of us who don't have that diagnosis. And I think, it's something that I was really even myself trying to learn from Paul, the character, as he's going through this. What do we have to learn about life from someone who's in that situation?
you know what, I think you summed that up perfectly, because I know when I first started reading it, I was more afraid, and I should have known, you as an author wouldn't do this, that it was going to be one of those kind of grief books, where it was going to have this big sad sob story that I'm dying and this is going to be what's going to happen. And that's not it at all. And I like what you said, that we learn to live from them. And Anne's right when she says that. So.
Yeah. And I think the thing is with Paul too, is that he's really, in many ways, he's in denial. I think as many of us would be in that situation, where he just keeps forgetting, that this is his reality, that he's received this diagnosis and that he's living with this thing, because he just keeps hoping, that this is not actually true. And I think that hope carries over into almost a sort of a willful, a little bit of a denial, I think.
I agree. So, and could you do me a favor, pronounce the city again?
Nisa.
See, I guessed that all night, or all the whole time I was reading. I don't think I ever guessed it right. So sorry about that.
No, there you go.
Called it nice.
Yeah. It's funny when you read a book in your mind, right? You can create any kind of pronunciations that you want. Yep.
That worked out really good for me, because I was like, I give up. I have no idea what this is supposed to be. So thank you. I appreciate that. So Susie, I'm going to ask you the same question. So is there something you would like people to get from your book?
Oh boy. Well, like Shawn, hope is a thread throughout the story, and family, like knowing that you have a place to land, that you have people who are watching out for you. But even further than that, a major theme in the book is being held in God's hand, but not grasped and crushed in God's hand, but held. And that God sees us as we live our lives, as we rise, as we fall, and he cares. And I think as I was writing this book, it was the pandemic. And so a lot of people that I interacted with virtually, and even myself, we struggled with the whole, I'm feeling all of these things and losing friends and not being able to go to their funerals, or, having people move away and not being able to say goodbye and everything. And just, does God see this? And does he even care? And as I was writing this, I kept feeling like God was talking to me through these characters saying, I'm here, I see, I care.
I love that. I love that. Now, with your book, Susie, you based it around the was it called Baby Drop?
Operation Baby Lift.
That's what it was. I was close. They didn't drop the babies.
Nope.
They lifted them. I'm sorry. I never dropped a baby. Anyways, so what kind of
True confessions with Chris Jagger.
So anyways, let's go back to being serious here. Goodness gracious. What kind of research did you do about like the baby lift or any of that time?
Actually, I did a lot of research. Because the baby lift happened in 1975, it's really easy to find information. There were a lot of memoirs that I read of families and some of the children who were adopted. And there are documentaries, and I could watch news footage of Gerald Ford walking off a plane holding a baby. And so I really immersed myself in that. And I've been researching the Vietnam War for quite a while. And so that was a very natural step into this research. And I listened to a lot of Fleetwood Mac.
Oh, I could see that's great research.
Yeah, that was really fun. And 80s music, lots of 80s music.
Some of it was good. Some of the 80s music was sketchy.
Chris, I think that's a great question, because the thing is, like, Susie, you tackled two of the most iconic eras for us anyway, when you talk about the 70s and the 80s. In the 80s, I think we were talking about our age earlier. We have some personal experience with the 80s, but the 70s and Vietnam and, the peace movement, all of that, I think it feels to me like it would be a lot to tackle. But it's interesting that you said you have some experience already from your other books. So it sounds like you kind of stepped into that.
Well, and my dad, it was in Vietnam. And so I grew up hearing about the war and from his perspective. So his stories were funny because he wasn't going to tell children the nitty gritty. So I think that researching Vietnam, it was a lot of researching my childhood, even like why he did the things he did or said the things he said. He had this habit of always sniffing his food before he would eat it. And we just thought it was like this weird quirk. It was because they had to make sure that the food wasn't rancid before they ate it. So just different things like that. So it was really insightful into my childhood. And my family and I went to this car museum over the weekend for Father's Day. And they have all of these old cars. And I stuck my head into a car that was from 1975. And it still smelled like the 70s. Like cigarette smoke.
What are the 70s? I was going to say, what do the 70s smell like?
Cigarette smoke and leather.
Nice.
And I was born in 78. So the fact that I still remember what the 70s smelled like, I think that's pretty fantastic. Yeah. And I was like, kids, this is what the 70s smelled like.
Okay, I lived through the 70s. I don't remember any of that.
You didn't grow up in Lansing.
Well, you're right. I lived in little town Hudsonville. Maybe that was the problem. Nobody ever smoked in Hudsonville. So anyways. So I actually have a couple of questions here because with the book you wrote, I don't think there's probably research into death and dying that you probably did. But how do you get a theme like that? Where do you get the ideas to write that?
Yeah, that's a good question, Chris. I usually have, I find that as I get into a book pretty early on, there's usually a question that emerges in my mind, like a central question to the book. And so like when I wrote The Day the Angels Fell, I pretty quickly realized that the question was, could it be possible that death is a gift? And so a lot of my books, there have been these questions. And with The Weight of Memory, I think I really wanted to sort of question this whole idea of what is real, and what is not real. And, could it be possible that the things that we sort of label as unreal actually have an impact on our lives, and how much does our perception of reality impact our lives? And so, um, when it comes to Paul, I think, without giving away the ending, I do try and create a situation where you're left wondering, how much of this is real, and how much of this is just in Pearl's head, and how much of, even if it was just in Pearl's head, did it have an impact on the real world? And so that was sort of the fun little question that I was trying to explore a little bit.
Oh, interesting. I like that. So I have a question for you. I'm going to couch it with try not to give any spoilers away. Okay. So if you don't think you can answer it without giving a spoiler away, just say that. Okay. And that's fine. But somebody wants to know, did you know how the story would end when you started? And I think that's a great question.
Yeah, that is a great question. And no, I did not. So I probably knew the ending about 60% through. So when I had the draft about 60% finished, I felt like I knew what the ending was. But even then, yeah, it's kind of hard to talk about without giving
I
anything
know.
away. No, even then I felt like I wasn't completely sure.
Okay.
Because I felt for a while like the story was leading me down a path that I wasn't really happy with. And then as I got closer to the end, I realized, oh, wait a second, that's what happens. And so I was actually kind of relieved once this ending started to show itself, because up until that point, I felt like I knew how it was going to end, and I wasn't really that excited about it.
Oh, interesting answer. Thank you, whoever sent that question in. That was a great one.
What about Susie? Do you usually know the endings to yours?
Do
you usually know like how many people you're going to kill off?
None. Because someone dared me. Alexa
that's funny.
Louise dared me not to kill anyone, so I didn't. Don't get used to it, people. But I think it depends on the book.
Yeah.
Some books, the whole story kind of just comes to me. For Stories That Bind Us, I didn't know the end until like 6 months after I submitted it to my editor.
Nice.
Oops. But for this one, yes, I did. So I think that was kind of the Lord being kind to me for my pandemic book, making the ending come easily. And it's not all tied up in like a packaged bow or anything. I just kind of have the reader step out of the story. And I know some people won't like it, but this, I think that this was the way that it needed to end. Now for the story that I'm writing now, I don't know, but don't tell Kelsey, the editor, that I don't know.
Hey, everybody, don't tell Kelsey.
Kelsey, if you're listening, I'll buy you some coffee and a donut.
And a donut. Okay, so this is a twofold question. Answer however you guys want to and in whichever order. Somebody wants to know, how did both authors get the idea for their latest books? And then why did you choose to write about these topics? I thought that was a good secondary question. So
you go first, Susie.
Okay. So when I was researching for All Manner of Things, which is a book that came out 2 years ago, I think, that book was set in 1967. So I was doing a lot of research into the Vietnam War. And I stumbled upon this article about Operation Baby Lift, and I printed it off and I thought, well, I want to read about this later. Who knows if there's a story? So I printed it, saved it, I have a file that's for future story ideas because I will forget. And so it came time for me to propose a few story ideas to my editor. And I found that article and I thought, well, it's a good idea. So I came up with a little synopsis and I came up with 3 different stories and I submitted them thinking, they're not going to choose the baby lift one. And I kind of hope they don't because it scares me. And that's
why did it scare you? What was scary about it for you?
The emotional part of it. As a parent, I can't imagine being a mother in Vietnam who gives up a child because they're afraid that the child will not be safe if they stay with them. Because that was the situation for a lot of these women. A lot of these women, their children, their biological fathers were American GIs. And this doesn't make it in the book, but these women were told that once the communists, the North Vietnamese, took over South Vietnam, that they would kill all of these children. And so they were terrified. So I knew that the emotional toll this book would take. And, you know, there's always this fear that I'm going to write something badly. Like I'm not going to capture what needs to be captured in a book. And so the other 2 ideas were a lot fluffier. But apparently the editors never want fluff for me. Come on. But then they chose this story idea. So once I started writing it, I knew it was right. I knew it was the right story. What's the rest of the question? I can't remember.
I can't remember either. I just remember the first part.
I don't know why you guys think you need me. Why write about this topic?
Well, because they told me to. But then ultimately, I think the story of adoption, what I've learned from my friends who have been adopted, my friends who have adopted children, and even a few friends who have been a birth mom that have never reunited with their child. Adoption is not a one-year story. It is a lifelong story. And so that's why I wanted to have 3 different storylines to tell the full story. So,
yeah.
Shawn?
Nice. So the idea for mine came first of all from George MacDonald wrote a book called The Light Princess, which I absolutely loved and I was just kind of obsessed with it the summer that I was working on this story. I was listening to it and I would listen to it over and over and over again. It's only like 3 or 4 hours long on Audible. So I listened to it, oh man, I don't know, 5 or 6 times that summer and really started to wonder, okay, how could I kind of play with some of the same themes and you know, the Light Princess, this princess is very eccentric, very quirky. And so I tried to bring some of her traits into my character Pearl in the book. And also I love the movie. A lot of people are totally freaked out by this movie, but I love the movie Pan's Labyrinth. And I love it because it is a fairy tale for adults, you know, like that's what Del Toro calls it. And I wanted to try that. You know, I wanted to try and write a book that was sort of more along the lines of an adult fairy tale. And so that was kind of a fun challenge. What was the second question? Why did I write about these themes? I think, well, I mean, if you read any of my other books, I'm obviously obsessed with death. So, that is going to make its way in somewhere. But I'm also really interested in memory. And so that came up in These Nameless Things and Light from Distant Stars, where I just have this, I'm just so interested in how we misremember, you know, how we think we have these memories, but that's not really how it happened, you know. I think I've told the story before so I co-write and ghostwrite books also. And I was working on a project, a memoir for an older woman. She was in her 90s, like 95. And she told me this story, and her son happened to be with us the day she was telling the story. And he's in his late 60s. And so she's telling me the story about how when her husband died, she came down to the marina. She had dropped her son off at baseball practice and came down to the marina and saw that her husband was being brought in by an ambulance. And then she went with him to the hospital. But her son sitting there in the room with me was like, no, Mom, that's not how it happened. I was with you on the bank. Like, I remember standing there beside you as they brought Dad in at the marina. And she was like, no, I'm telling you, I dropped you off at baseball practice. I remember doing this. And then I went down. So one of them, you know, they were both completely sure that they were right. They both had very firm, very detailed memories of that moment. And there's no possible way that both of them were right. And so as I started to do more and more co-writing and memoir writing with clients, I realized that there were so many times when people's memories just did not line up. You know, when one of them had obviously created a memory for some reason that had not happened. And so for me, over the years, that has just become sort of an obsession, a really high interest, where I just love learning more about memory, how we create memories, and, you know, the fact that many of the things that we remember just did not happen the way that we remember them.
That is so fascinating. And wow, I love that. And I love that you played with that in this story in particular. And I also want to say that I had the privilege of endorsing These Nameless Things. And I was like, man, Shawn's like the modern day George McDonald. Just like, that was because in college I read some George McDonald and I was like, that's who you remind me of. And in your own style though. And so when you were just talking about him, I was just like, I nailed it.
Oh, thanks, Susie. Thank you. Yeah.
I have a question. Oh, this is from somebody who was.
We don't get any names. So those that you in the audience know, we don't say names because we don't.
But it's not my question. I didn't come up with it. Shawn, is your pearl named after my pearl Spence from the Cup of Nuts series?
No, but I know that you have a pearl, and I was really debating whether or not to keep this name. It was something that I really struggled with right up until I kind of pulled the trigger on the last draft. I love the name mostly because of all the connotations from the Scarlet Letter, and that's really. Whenever I pick names, I do try to choose names that bring a little bit of baggage with them, because I think it makes it interesting for the reader when you hear a name and you immediately think of, you know, these associations. So it did not have to do with Susie's book, unfortunately. However, I need to try and work one of those in my next one.
Well, but here's the thing. When I started reading The Weight of Memory and I saw that her name was Pearl, it made me smile so hard because I was just like, oh, it's my favorite name. And in fact, I wanted to name our daughter Pearl.
Oh yeah.
Because that was my grandma's name. But my husband was like, I'm not sure. So I was like, well, then I'm gonna name my character Pearl, because it's such a great name. And I was so glad that you used it. And I also thought of the connotation of just how a pearl is like grown underwater. And I thought that kind of went along with some of your things. So I thought maybe that was intentional, but
that was not intentional, but I love that. That is really cool.
Your next interview, use that.
Yes,
pretend
I'm
that it was
totally pulling that
exactly your
out.
idea.
Oh man, I'm a genius.
And your Pearl is actually, she kind of causes disturbances for Paul, and that's what a Pearl is a disturbance for the poor little clam.
Man.
Oyster. The oyster. I'm smart. Thank you, Chris. You're welcome.
So, you know what, and since we're already talking names here, one of the listeners would like to know where you guys get your names from. Is there a certain, do you look in a phone book until you find one you like, or do you like, oh, this character's name is, and then it works? Because like you said, it had to be Pearl.
How about you, Susie?
I'll start with this because this book in particular, they're my friends. So Bruce is of the different storylines. Bruce is in his 60s, and my friend Bruce Matthews actually is a musician and a bird nerd, just like me. And his wife's name is Linda in real life, and so I stole her.
Wow.
And I have a friend named Sunny Heisman who I've wanted to use her name for years because who doesn't love the name Sunny? Like, isn't it the cutest?
Yes.
So I was like, hey, you guys want to be in a book? And so their families are in there. I have permission, it's fine. And actually, I was hoping that Bruce Matthews could sing at my release party, but he will be in the Adirondacks watching loons swim around.
Whatever.
He's such a lucky guy. He gets to do all that stuff. Yeah.
So how about you, Shawn? Where do you get the ideas for your names?
Well, with my very first book, The Day the Angels Fell, I used the names of my kids who we had at that time. So Cade, Lucy, Abra, Sam, they all kind of found their way into the book, which was fun because I was writing it for them and I initially self-published it. So it was just kind of a very intimate project that I was doing for them. Since then, I would say that I like to use names, like I said, that kind of bring baggage with them. So with These Nameless Things, the protagonist's name is Dan, which the story is based on Dante's Inferno. So he's kind of like a stand-in for Dante. In this particular book, Paul Elias actually means something, and I can't remember what it means, but so there you go. So I was very deliberate. Yeah. In my book, Light from Distant Stars, Cohen Mara, I picked that name very specifically because Cohen means priest and Mara means bitter. And those are both, I believe they're both Hebrew words. And so that was how I picked his name. He's not actually a priest in the book, but he sort of has this interesting relationship with God and belief and things like that. So I usually do try and choose names that, I loved how Steinbeck in East of Eden, his names were like Adam and Aaron, and these names that just bring so much history with them, either literary or biblical or, whatever. So I love to choose names like that.
Do your characters, either one of you, do your characters name themselves, or do you specifically have a name and then use it and go with it?
I've tried to do that, but it just never turns out because I can't, like, a character that I don't have a name for never develops.
Oh, interesting.
Also, any Jimmy that's in one of my books, Death Nail, I always write out the Jimmies. I've had a Jimmy in every single book and I'm like, nah, he's just not working for me. So I think there's something about the name Jimmy that I'm just like, nah, I don't like it. No offense.
I think someday you're going to have
in real life, I love Jimmy. Jimmy's a good guy, but fictional Jimmy and Susie stories, you're not going to last long.
Yeah.
I think someday you're going to have a protagonist in your #1 New York Times bestselling book, and his name is going to be Jimmy. So he is just waiting to make his appearance at the right moment.
Maybe he's waiting for the right story, because for years I've wanted to have a Bertha in one of my stories because my great aunt's name was Bertha, and she was like the most beautiful woman. So like she was just amazing, amazing person. And I've been waiting for a story for Bertha, and I'm writing her story now.
Oh, there you go.
So
See?
maybe
Jimmy's on his way. Jimmy's on his way.
How about you, Shawn? Do you like characters name themselves? I mean, and I know you've said you've picked some, by, because they have baggage or whatever they mean. Are there ones where you're like, well, I want it to be this, and then it ends up over here because the character insists that's their name?
Yeah, I mean, my names do change quite a bit. Like Susie, it's hard for me to write a nameless character, so I'll start with something, but I would say probably 30 to 40% of my characters will end up with a different name by the end of the book.
Oh, that's interesting. That's a lot.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I was talking to an author one time too, and they said, yeah, I had this character all written out and they were mad at me because they had the wrong name. So,
Nice.
okay, I have an interesting question for both of you. And Shawn, I'm going to ask you first, and then Susie, you can follow up. In your newest novels, do you have a favorite secondary character? And I thought that was an interesting question.
That is an interesting question. I think my favorite secondary character was probably Shirley. Partially because, we talk about names in this book. Actually, hey, I forgot about this. Paul and Shirley were names of wonderful family friends. They both have since passed away. And Shirley was like a second mom to my wife. So when Miley was first born, her mom had to have gallbladder surgery, which, back in the 70s was a pretty big deal. And she was in the hospital for a month. And so she had just had Miley. And so Miley's mom's best friend, Shirley, basically took in Miley for that first month and took care of her while her mom was in the hospital. So Shirley has always, always meant a lot to our family. She passed away about 10 years ago. And so when I picked that name, I mean, if you knew Shirley, this character is like her to a T, just full of life, always game, always up for anything. And I think because of that, she probably is my favorite secondary character.
I do like Shirley. She was great. I would have picked Mary, but I like Shirley too.
Yeah.
So, how about you?
This book is so different because there are essentially 4 main characters. So I would have to say Mrs. Olds, who is starting a museum. And so she hires Sunny and Mindy, who are teenagers in the 80s. Mindy is also called Min in the book. That's her Vietnamese name. And Mindy is the name that she kind of gets forced on her by her sister Sunny, because sisters do these things. But Mrs. Olds, she is based on a woman that I grew up with at our church. She was a professional actress at like a community type theater, but it was like the classy one. And she was just the kind of woman that was just inspiring and eccentric and wore big earrings. And she was amazing. And so writing that character into this book, just to be kind of like the person that's like, do you hear that? It's history. That she was really fun to write. And it took me back to my childhood a little bit.
Yeah,
I loved her because I felt like she was a safe person. Like you didn't know at first, right? Like, how is she going to deal with Mindy? But I did like that she proved to be a safe space, because obviously, the time frame, the situation, there were plenty of unsafe spaces for each of the characters and situations and things like that. So I really loved that she ended up being a kind person. I wanted to ask you, Susie, you mentioned having so many main characters. Did you find the writing to be different, or the pre-writing, or was there did the process feel different for you having to get into so many different heads at that level?
Yes. It was around January when I decided to write it in the different points of view. And this, without a doubt, is my most complex storyline. And it was very difficult because then my children were home.
Oh yeah. Hey, let's write the hardest book I can write while I have children everywhere.
During a pandemic. Right. So fortunately, there are noise canceling headphones and such, but it was difficult, and it was particularly difficult for me to write Bruce because he's a guy, and I've never written from the point of view of a man before.
Okay.
And so there were times when I would have to, ask my husband, would a man say this? Would a man notice this? But what I did was really try to have my friend Bruce's voice. He's got like this very deep, almost Johnny Cash type voice. So I would just like try to hear his voice in my head. And that did help, but it was difficult. Writing the easiest parts were writing Sunny, because she was a little more lighthearted, and I needed lighthearted and very like, ew, kind of almost Valley Girl.
I loved, first of all, you nailed it. You nailed it. Like, it's so hard to get those kind of distinctive voices right, I think. So many times for me, they kind of blend together. So, if I'm reading a book and someone's using all those voices, sometimes I can't keep them separate, or there's two that sound similar. But I thought you did amazing. And I loved Sunny. Something about Sunny's storyline reminded me of Celeste Ng's Little Fires Everywhere, just with kind of like the teeny bopperness, but then also like there was this undercurrent of like serious, but you knew it was there, but she was also a kid. And then the other thing that I loved was that, even though Sunny was the same, even though it was the same character as an older woman or as a woman, I thought you did a really good job of making her different, because you think about how much we change from when we're teenagers to when we're adults. And I think it would have been easy for you. And I think it probably would have been kind of sloppy to make older Sunny a lot like, teen Sunny. Like, oh, she's still kind of the same. But I thought you did a really good job of showing that, oh, wow, no, she's actually like an adult now. And she's a different person. I mean, she's the same person, but she's different. So I thought that was really good.
Well, thank you, Shawn. I wanted her to have growth. I wanted to show the maturity. And I think of myself, of course, I was 10 in 1988. So I wasn't like big hair, like puffy sleeves back then. I was a tomboy, but I remember my big sister and how she was in the 80s, and then, how much she grew up. So thank you for saying that. That actually is very, very sweet and very encouraging.
So now to back up here, we did have a follow-up question to the secondary characters. Someone was interested if either one or if any of your other secondary characters would ever have their own story.
Ooh.
Well, okay, so
It doesn't happen.
Chris in this book was in All Manner of Things. He was like a secondary character in that, and actually he's a real person too. And he's the drummer in our little.
Wait, are you writing novels, or are you actually just like stealing real life stories and then calling them fiction?
I'm giving my friends stories to live that weren't their own.
She is the epitome of don't tell her anything, it'll end up in her book.
Right, exactly.
And if she doesn't like you, she kills you off.
I've never, well, yes, I have killed one person I know.
Yes, you did.
You've killed one person you know. Oh my goodness.
I was dared. My friend dared me too. It's in my mother's chamomile. That the death count in that one is a little
Oh,
higher.
it's a bloodbath.
Um, you know what? Somebody one time, they met me after reading my books, they met me and they were like, didn't expect you to be so, I don't know, happy. Anyway, Shawn, any secondary characters that would possibly get their own story?
Well, it was really fun. One of the funnest things for me was to write Sam and Abra into this story. So Sam and Abra from The Day the Angels Fell, my very first novel. And it was funny because when I started this book, I really felt like the location of Nisa felt very much to me like Dean from The Day the Angels Fell. And I thought, oh, wow, what if they're not actually that far, or at least, within striking distance. And so during one of my revisions, I thought, oh, it'd be really fun to bring Sam and Abra back. So they are secondary characters who already have their own story. I'm kind of interested. This is not going to happen, but if I had to pick one, I would write about Tom a little bit more. I feel like there's a lot going on there with him that doesn't really get explored in the book. And I feel like he could be kind of interesting. Yeah.
Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah, because there's a lot to him, like very deep goings on in that mind. And I would be really interested to read more about him and his life. And I do need to hop back just a little bit. When I was reading and Sam and Abra showed up, it felt so familiar and comfortable. It was very comfortable. It was one of those moments where I was like, oh yeah, this is right. Like it was a good moment. I stopped reading and then I read it again because it made me so happy.
Yeah, I loved bringing them back. It was
they're such good characters.
They're just, it was like getting to see an old friend again, and it definitely made me want to finish that series.
Oh, here, I was going to read the same question. I should put that over there so I don't. So you guys have both explored this. We're getting close to the end here. And I always like this question is, what is the writing process for you guys? You're welcome to go from beginning to end if you want to start in the middle, whatever works. But, when do you decide to start writing? When do you decide? I mean, obviously you have to ask if it's okay to write a book for your publisher. We all understand that part, but.
Shawn.
Susie. So I have gotten into this rhythm. Let's see, probably about 2016. I just decided that if I was going to get better at writing novels, I was going to have to write a lot of novels. Like I'm not, I don't feel like I was this, sort of natural born novelist who, is writing amazing stories at the age of 7. And so I wanted to be more consistent. So my goal was to write 10 novels in 10 years, starting about, 2015, 2016. And I think so far I'm on track, but I've developed this rhythm of starting a new story in December, January time, and then really cranking out the first draft. Usually I write about 1,000 words a day, 2,000 words a day when I'm in that phase, and trying to finish the first draft, really rough first draft by, April or May, and then taking a month away and just not looking at it. And then during the summer revising. So going through, once I now know the story, doing my revisions, working on it through the summer, so that by the time, the end of the summer comes, that I have a pretty fairly completed manuscript, at least one that's ready to be read by beta readers or editor if it's under contract. And so that's kind of been my process.
Interesting.
Oh, also, I want to show you this.
Oh,
Ow, I stubbed my toe again.
Shawn, he stubbed
We had
his
to call-
toe beforehand.
We had to call 911 for him earlier.
So this is kind of fun, I think, or it's fun for me anyway. So when I usually once I get about 20 or 30,000 words in, I'm writing mostly just kind of by the seat of my pants. But by the time I get to 20 or 30,000 words, I like to have a rough plan of where the story's going to go, because back when I was in my 20s and I tried to write novels, I would get to like 30, 40,000 words and then just totally go off the rails, like lose track. I wouldn't have any direction, and then I would just quit. So now what I try and do is create a little bit of a roadmap. So the current story that I'm working on, I made this, and each of the columns is a different section. So the book has 7 sections. Characters are up here, and this is just a list of scenes. And so I created that once I got to about about 20 or 30,000 words. So that's become, and I've done that for the last few novels. Either like make a physical arc that I fill in, or create some kind of a graph or spreadsheet or something.
Well, since Shawn showed something, I'm going to show you.
I was gonna say Susie's got pops.
Okay, so I print off, because I write historical, I need to know like what happens in the year. So I print off a calendar of the year, like,
Oh, wow. That's
and then I write
awesome.
in like historical events, pop culture, weather, because in Michigan, you never know.
Mhm.
And then I also will write in what happens in a scene on a particular day. And then that kind of gives me a little bit of a roadmap. I don't outline, but I'll use a calendar. And then I have like my notebook, and I look like a middle schooler because I have stickers all over it. But I like to know what the houses look like.
Oh,
because,
that's really cool.
in my first novel, I realized that the house that they were in had to have been like 50,000 square feet because of all the walking that was involved in that house. So
This is a little big.
it is a little big. That's a really expensive house. So I print off what like the floor plan and what it looks like on the outside, so that I know, okay, if she walks like 2 steps across the hall, she's in her sister's room or something like that. So that does help. And I like to write down like the music that they listen to, so I can listen to it, and the shows they watched or the movies they watched. As far as process goes, I research and then I write, and and every novel is different. I have never had 2 novels come out the same way. Like All Manner of Things came out clean. No other novel has ever done that. And I just really wish it would do that again.
Sorry, those are fire trucks going by.
Yeah, I didn't do it. I didn't kill anyone to cause those fire trucks to come by.
So, sorry, were you done?
I'm done.
I'm sorry. Because as we're in the last 5 minutes here, can either one of you share what you're working on now? I know sometimes you can and sometimes you can't. So if you can't, it's fine. But can you?
I can.
Good.
I'm not going to tell the title yet.
Nope, you can't.
If you follow me on Facebook, then you can find out the title when the cover is released. But I don't know when that's going to be. But it is set in 1952. And my main character's name is Bertha Harding, and I love her. She's plucky, she's kind, she's smart, and she is a baseball player. So we've got the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League. We've got the Red Scare, so communists,
Nice.
and a little bit of Shakespeare thrown in for good measure.
Awesome.
Good measure.
Measure by measure.
Awesome. Yeah, I am working on a murder mystery. I've never written a murder mystery before.
Oh,
So I am writing a murder mystery that takes place here in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania.
awesome.
I am so excited. That is so great, Shawn.
Yeah, it's really fun. It's
So
really
you're
fun.
going to be killing people too.
I know, finally. Man, took me long enough.
Can't wait to see which friends die off in that book.
Yeah.
Don't name any of them Susie.
I was gonna say, oh shoot, I think one's named Susie. Oh no.
That's awesome. And you don't know any Chris's, so that's good. So thank you both for joining us. I know I had a great time. We could go on for several more hours here. It's just fun having you guys just interact together too. So it's neat to have you guys talk that way together. But thank you for joining us. Shawn, I wish you could be here with us, but
I know.
the next best thing, man, is just to have you with us. So
yeah, thanks for the invite, Susie. It's great to see you as always. Chris, thank you for all the amazing work that you do to get books out into the world. It's such a big deal, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Shawn. That was very sweet of you to say. It is my pleasure. So
and readers, thank you for reading our books, because without you, there's no reason for us to do what we do. We really, I know I speak for Shawn when I say how much we appreciate you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I want them to keep writing because I really like my job. So just a mutual admiration society here tonight, aren't we? So. But thank you everybody for joining us. If you have any questions, let us know. Otherwise, you can catch the video again on Facebook and or Baker Bookhouse's YouTube channel. And you guys all have a good night. Bye now.